Hello and welcome to the Cantium Podcast in partnership with Public Sector Focus. My name is Dani Hayon, manager of the Cantium Podcast, and I'll be your host for today's episode where we're going to cover off a much lighter topic to complete season 1. Joined with me today is Darren Body, marketing manager at Cantium and creator of the Cantium Podcast. Together, we're going to be chatting about why the podcast exists, how we created it, who it's for, and much more. So Darren, I know you've hosted a few episodes in season 1, so nice to see you in a different seat today.
Thank you.
I thought it'd be nice if we could just start off by you telling our viewers a little bit more about you.
Yeah, sure. And I'm an unknown face to this podcast. So I've been at Cantium since Cantium's inception in 2018, but my career has always been public sector. I started way before that. So I spent a couple of years in Kent Police Control Room, which is where I kind of first entered the public sector and learned about the challenges there. I then moved to KCC and performed some IT roles there, before moving to Cantium and moving into the social media kind of marketing world. And I've kind of been here ever since, really. So it's always been public sector for me. It's always been about improving citizen outcomes, and whether that's directly at the police or indirectly as we do now. I've really enjoyed it so far.
And what led to you deciding to create the Cantium Podcast?
Yeah, so that's a big project for us. As you've seen, we've been doing this for a good 6 months or so now. It's been a good project. And ultimately, It initially started where I saw a big gap in online content.
Yeah.
It was, there's nobody out there that's doing what we've managed to achieve over the past 6 months. You know, we've got probably the highest production value and highest production in terms of how it looks and the actual content we're producing in the public sector. So to be able to have that in public sector tech, it's just something they don't have. And then when we look to see that kind of, I know we discussed this as well, right? AI and the way that the content AI can now create, a lot of what we did before was written. So it's okay, what can AI not recreate? And ultimately that's conversations like the one we're going to have today, conversations like we've had on the podcast so far. You know, doing this type of thing is just not possible with that. So being able to have a genuine conversation from the experts we have at Cantium, I think has been really, really valuable.
Yeah, and it's nice that AI has been able to play such a big part in that, and that's really helped us, I think, make the podcast as good as it is.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, what it allows is the public sector tech decision makers that have been out there for so long, you know, they get to hear from our experts, hear from the people that get to do their research in the way that they want to do that. You know, it's that the things they don't see, that fresh perspective, the unseen behind the scenes, that real unique insight is what we're able to provide them. Yeah,
and that's something that's always been really important to us in this podcast, making sure that we have that unique insight for all the topics we cover off. So what would you describe unique insight as meaning to you?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we had to redefine in our team when we started creating the podcast, right? And for me, it's a revelation. It's a real aha moment. You know, those Einstein ahas. That's the way I see them. It provokes a reaction inside of you. You go, oh, that makes sense to me now. I get it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that perhaps our content lacked in the past, and something the podcast has been able to bring out, and you've been able to bring out in some of our guests.
Yeah.
You know, it's looking back at some of the first episodes we did, like seeing that with the cloud in the public sector and security, for example, and how we're sitting there talking about actually third-party oversight is really important. And that's something that everyone kind of forgets about because they just think, oh, we can do this by ourselves. We've got in-house experts. Actually, third-party oversight is being missed out massively, and that could have solved a lot of the problems. And I think the big one we've discussed several times is the Women in Tech episode we had, right? Episode 5 there, with Amy and Debbie came on. We not only learned about like the diverse representation in tech, that's not the aha moment. I think for me, the aha moment with that one really was why that gender gap exists and how they've taken it back to, well, yeah, at school, I had wedding planners come and talk to me. I wasn't allowed to talk about technology, and I wasn't told that that was a career option for me. And even though that may well be fixed in the modern day, that certainly has probably led to why we are where we are today.
And I think for me, I had a similar moment with that episode when they were relating that gender representation gap back to their own experiences. And I did really have that aha, because their experiences weren't dissimilar to mine in terms of the careers experience and advice that they were given at school, as they were growing up. It was very similar to what I experienced. And I knew that people listening would relate to that. So that was a really great one. And it was nice to cover off that topic because it's quite different to other things that we've done. And I think as well with the cybersecurity episode where you interviewed Victor, and he was talking about the good AI versus the bad AI. And I thought that was really good because it's something that is so important for everyone to know, that although we have the good AI where we've got machine learning, picking up trends that might indicate suspicious activity, there's also the cyber attackers who are using AI to make their attacks more targeted, more sophisticated. And I think that's, as sort of technology and AI evolves, that's something I thought that's such a good message to make people aware of.
Yeah, the more that you can use something for good, the more you can use it for bad. And yeah, I agree. It's a good few episodes there.
Yeah. And when you were designing the Cantium podcast, like, who did you have in mind it would be for?
I think really it's the people that Cantium talk to on a regular basis anyway. We work with people across the public sector. That could be schools, healthcare, local government, central government, for example. And there's a lot of people there that are, making decisions, but also researching this, either for their own purposes. They might be looking at it for careers, for example. But mainly they're looking at making buying decisions or strategic decisions. And that we spoke about third-party oversight briefly, but it's also sometimes you need that third-party input strategically as well.
Yeah.
And especially the public sector can't always afford that, right? And sometimes you just need to be able to hear and feel that, yes, I'm making the right decision. So being able to give them this type of content in a way that they want it and the way that they consume it is the main thing I wanted to be able to do. So by us recording a podcast episode, we're able to then repurpose that like we have been into different clips of social media, different social media content, maybe blogs for the website or written or infographics or an article we then go and put into public sector focus, for example, right? So it's for anybody in the public sector. I think some people and the people in my network that I talk to still in the tech world, they're private sector, but they're still getting value out of this.
Yeah.
So yes, we're aiming it at those public sector tech decision makers. I think anybody that works in tech and anybody that works in the public sector, even if you're just a member of our team, for example, and you're just working with the technology, there's some value here. So I think we've really managed to bring out some kind of useful things for everybody.
Yeah, and we've covered such a broad range of topics in season 1 too, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, what did we start with? We started with cloud security. We've gone to kind of the episode with Victor. We spoke about the best practices, those insights. We've covered MIS for schools. We had our data protection officer on. We've had that Women in Tech episode. But then we've gone into those bigger topics, such as like the modern service desk, different ways of insourcing and outsourcing tech. You've got the Surface thing that we've done with KCC, that whole case study we did as an episode that you talk about that and how that's working, which, yes, includes Windows 11, but we had that Windows 11 episode. Yeah. Where partners like Arrow ECS on, been able to come and talk about Copilot. And then we've even had people from the sector like Matt Sinclair on, which will be the last episode that we recorded, right? Where he's able to come on and talk about what's going on in central government, how they're seeing things happen, the movement with AI, the movement with technology as a whole and the skills gap and everything that's kind of holding back the public sector and legacy tech. So I think we've had a real range there from covering, yes, the target audience we wanted to talk to, but our customers, our partners, suppliers that we talk to, and colleagues across the business, which you've spoken with the most, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that's been most enjoyable working on the podcast is working with our teams, looking at who we can bring onto the podcast, looking at our partners, special guests, who we can work with. And everyone's been really keen to get involved. I think they've seen colleagues being able to have that platform to put across their voice, their opinions, provide advice, and everyone's been really keen to get involved. So it's been very popular.
It's been good. I think I really obviously I started those first few episodes of the podcast and really handed this over to you. What's that experience been like since you've kind of been managing the podcast?
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, a lot has changed since episode 3 and we're always progressing and making changes and improving, aren't we? But it always really begins with looking at what the customer's problem is. So do we have a solution for that? Have we already solved that problem for our customer? Because if so, we're going to have the experience and insight to be able to share. Perhaps we haven't had a chance to solve it yet, but we might have that fresh perspective or unique insight, like you said, on it. And then it's looking at who we've got to bring onto the podcast. So is it someone from our internal teams? Perhaps we want to bring on one of our partners or a special guest. And like I said, that has been an easy part of the podcast where everyone's been so keen to get involved. And then really it's a lot of research, but that is really supported heavily by our internal team. So we have other things that we do, such as keyword research, working with public sector focus to make sure that we're really adding that value on what we know viewers want to see. But as I said, with our internal teams, they have so much knowledge and expertise. They're working with our customers day to day to solve these challenges that we're talking about. But they've also got such a broad knowledge of the industry itself. So that has been a huge support in making sure that we're creating episodes that are valuable for people to listen to and that they're happy to take their time and enjoy listening to.
Yeah, so I know one of them challenges is working with those experts, right, and drawing that. Like we can sit there and plan an episode and we go, right, here's that insight that we really want to pull out of them. But how would you say you've been able to work with them to pull that insight back out of our experts?
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be challenging when we have people that are nervous or perhaps they aren't used to speaking to large audiences, or say public speaking isn't their forte. Yeah. But we know that they've got the knowledge and the passion for the subject, which is why we always knew the podcast would be successful, isn't it? Because we've got the people that are passionate about what they do. Yeah. And they're experts in their field. So I think sometimes pulling that out of them, is the difficult bit, but it's always so rewarding when you're working with someone, they're perhaps nervous and you see them just relax into that conversation. And once they've overcome that hurdle, that stride, and they've got that confidence, they don't go back. And that's something that's always really, really rewarding to see.
I think bringing them through multiple episodes, for example, there's a host that I think about that we bring through from maybe one of our first episodes and into future episodes as well, right? You can see them get a lot more comfortable with it. Yes, on camera, but also what we obviously see behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, you can see that progression. And I think seeing people leave with that accomplishment is always really rewarding from our part. One of the great things about this podcast.
Yeah, I agree.
So I know the Cantium Podcast was created for Cantium to be able to share its knowledge and expertise. So how would you say it does that?
I think for me, it's bringing those experts that we have. That could be, as you said, in-house staff. It could be bringing in partners that we've got to talk about the topical news, the challenges, talk about those insights. I think there's been plenty of examples of how we've done that. I mean, I know there's one that we've discussed, right, in terms of the co-pilot episode that we did. What's your example of how that episode kind of brings that knowledge in?
Yeah, I think with the co-pilot episode, that was one that really struck me because I recognised how useful it was going to be for so many people. So when chatting with Ian about the episode, his passion for the subject really shone through and he drew me in straight away. And in the episode, he talks and provides examples about how he uses Copilot, how his team does it. And it's so relatable for so many roles. And as I was listening, I was thinking, wow, this could save me so much time. This could save me so much time. And knew others would be thinking the same because that's what we all really want, isn't it? More time back in our lives, whether that's to be more efficient or have more time for planning, creativity, or just get a better work-life balance. Yeah. So that was one of the episodes that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So could you walk me through creating the podcast from the start? How did you do that?
It did start with research, right? By researching, okay, who is our target audience? What are they doing? What content do they want to see? Yeah. Seeing what else has already been delivered in our sector, if there's kind of a gap in that. And I think there's a big gaping hole for me when I looked at that. It's our decision makers are getting younger. They're wanting different types of content in different formats and lengths. They don't just want to read long articles and long case studies. They want to be able to come across things on social media and then realize that, actually, I can take something away from that. So for me, naturally, that video podcast kind of set in, especially when some of the other biggest podcasts in the public sector are audio only. Yeah. It doesn't work as well on social media. It doesn't get engaged with as much. So it was an opportunity to go, how do we make sure we reach more people with the messages that we have? Because they are important messages and our experts their time is incredibly valuable. So how do we use that better, right? Beforehand, we spent a lot of time sat there in a room with them working out, okay, what are we going to write down about what you said to then publish online? And this time it's actually, I'm going to put you in a room, we're going to record what you say, and we can use that. So I only need that hour from you, right? We don't need more of that time. So that was the main bit, I think, of the process, was actually doing that. And then it was actually being able to find somewhere to do it, right? Because everything we've done before has just been in-house and being able to just write and publish. So how do we actually go about doing that? What do we want it to look like? How do we want it to sound? How do we want to come across? What type of episodes and what type of content can we actually do? I didn't want to publish a podcast because, no one else is doing a video podcast. It's what actually have we got something worthwhile to say that people want to listen to? And by the success of this podcast so far, it's an easy yes, right? But a lot of these cogs just kind of tick in my brain from how we've been doing things and how we work on this every day anyway. So that was easy for me. And I think it was that we filmed those pilot episodes, say back in the summer, way before we launched. And really it was, okay, how does this process work for us in terms of how can we edit this in a way that gets our message out there properly? And how do we share that and repurpose that into different content formats? And then actually launch that internally at Cantium first. So let's launch this internally. Let's see what people are thinking about it. And just the response we got there, you know, from talking with people in Cantium, I spoke with people in tech sector from my network, across our team as well. And I think everybody was like, wow, this is high value. This is great production. It looks good. It sounds good. The content's great. And just that reaction, I knew that we had struck gold. And saying the key thing is no one else was doing it.
Yeah.
Nobody else was doing it.
You know, we do plan out the conversation, but I think what I always really enjoy is when the conversation goes in a different direction that you hadn't planned, because that's when you get those natural, relaxed, you know, unplanned conversations. And that's often where the magic happens. And that's something I always really enjoy to see. And for those that haven't listened to the episodes, what would you say to them about why they should listen?
I think it's everything we've discussed today, right? I think that the key reasons are you get insight in a content format that you want, the way that you want to consume it, right? Any way you want to consume this podcast, it's there, whether it's a summary that we've done with it, whether it's the video, whether it's social media. You know, you get those experts, proper insights, the best practices, that value that you kind of need from talking to someone to go, how did that project work? You know, how did County Council's 9,000 device rollout for Surface devices, how did that work? How did the IT provider actually go about that? You know, so the reasons to listen are, you get that knowledge, you get the insight, you understand what's going on in the tech world, you get to do your research in a way that suits you, really.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of podcasts, and so am I. And I think it's such a great media and really helps to support, you know, people's work-life balance when they're busy. You can listen to it in the car, you can listen to it when you're doing chores. I'm always a big fan, so that would definitely be my chosen choice of media. So really glad that we could deliver it that way.
Yeah.
So for those that want to listen to episodes that we've done through season 1, how best can they do that?
Yeah, I think my preferred way is for you to go to YouTube and watch the actual video that's there, right? It's just, as I've said, it's a really good, high quality video podcast. You get to see the people in the flesh that you're listening to. But it's actually on all the audio platforms as well. So whether that's Spotify, Apple, Deezer, Amazon, it's on all of those. There's obviously an RSS feed you can subscribe to. So it's pretty much however you want to consume it is available to. And that's the point. It's all about the person listening. It's not about Cantium. It's not about us. It's not about the people that sat in the room on the episode, right? It's however you want to consume it, you can. So if you want to consume it in a written format, go to the Cantium.solutions website and you can consume it there as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I know you've really enjoyed making this podcast, and so have I. It's been a really rewarding experience, and I hope people will go and listen to our season 1 episodes. Yeah,
I hope so as well. You know, I really want to be able to thank you for being able to take this over and make sure that the last 10 or so episodes have been exactly what we planned them out to be. You know, I know you've been supported by our team to be able to do that. Particularly Sam spent a lot of his time editing these episodes and making sure that we've got the best we possibly got, you know, and we've got Francis at Run Productions has really helped us actually put this together and keep this on top. But ultimately it's the exec committee at Cantium that I said, hey, I want to go and do a high production video podcast, and they've let us run with this and they trusted us, right? So it's a big thanks to them for kind of making this happen as well. So yeah, thank you for having this conversation today, and we can actually tell people about the podcast, and hopefully it's been useful to actually figure out why this exists, you know, and it's a nice way to complete season 1, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Great conversation. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks for hosting, Dani.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cantium Podcast in partnership with Public Sector Focus, please subscribe wherever you're listening or by visiting www.cantium.solutions.